Welcome to Hollywood Latest Reports. When it comes to love stories within the Swaggart family, few have captured as much quiet curiosity and speculation as that of Gabriel Swaggart and Grace Brumley. Today, they are seen as one of the most stable and respected couples in the world of Christian ministry. But the road to their union was not as smooth as many assume. Beneath the calm smiles and perfect public image, there lies a chapter that very few people know, a time when Grace Brumley actually rejected Gabriel Swaggart. The reason, as insiders and close friends once whispered, had little to do with ego or pride, and everything to do with a lack of understanding between two young hearts trying to balance love, faith, and purpose. At the time they first met, Gabriel was already known as a rising figure in his family's ministry. As the grandson of Jimmy Swaggart, one of the most influential televangelists in the United States, Gabriel carried a heavy legacy on his shoulders. Grace, on the other hand, was a quiet but spiritually mature young woman who had grown up surrounded by faith and ministry. She was not dazzled by fame or position. People who knew her back then described her as sincere, grounded, and cautious, someone who believed love should be built on understanding, not attraction or status. When Gabriel first began showing interest in Grace, it wasn't met with the fairy tale excitement one might expect. Grace admired Gabriel's dedication to his calling, but she was also observant enough to notice the differences between them, not in belief, but in maturity and understanding. Gabriel was still finding himself, learning to balance his calling with his personal identity, while Grace wanted clarity, depth, and emotional connection. According to those who knew them in those early days, Grace worried that Gabriel was more in love with the idea of love than with the woman herself. Their early friendship was warm but cautious. Grace respected Gabriel deeply, but she could sense that their communication often lacked emotional understanding. They could talk about faith and ministry for hours, but when it came to feelings, fears, or emotional honesty, there seemed to be a gap. Grace wasn't willing to build a relationship without mutual understanding. She wanted a partner who would not only lead in ministry, but also listen, care, and understand her as a woman and individual. This difference eventually led her to reject his initial proposal or advances, leaving Gabriel stunned and heartbroken. Many who were close to the Swaggart family during that time recall how Gabriel struggled after Grace's decision. He was used to respect, admiration, and success, but rejection was something new. It humbled him. For the first time, he realized that spiritual calling alone doesn't guarantee personal connection. This period became a turning point in his emotional and spiritual growth. Friends describe how Gabriel began to reflect deeply, focusing on his communication skills, learning patience, and understanding how true love must be nurtured through empathy and respect. Grace's rejection was not cruel or emotional. It was graceful, honest, and rooted in discernment. She wasn't rejecting Gabriel the man, but rather the stage he was in. She believed he needed time to grow, to truly understand himself and what it means to love another person deeply. And in truth, that pause was one of the best things that could have happened to both of them. In the months that followed, Gabriel underwent what he later described as a period of introspection. He dove deeper into scripture, seeking wisdom not just as a preacher but as a man. He began to mature emotionally, learning how to see beyond ministry duties and understand the heart of a partner. Grace, meanwhile, continued her own spiritual journey, focusing on personal faith and ministry work. Though the two had limited contact during that time, both later admitted that the distance helped them see each other more clearly. When they eventually crossed paths again, the energy between them had changed. Gabriel was calmer, wiser, and more patient. Grace noticed that the once fiery and impulsive young preacher had developed a humility that drew her closer. Their conversations became more open and meaningful, their laughter more genuine, and their connection, now grounded in mutual understanding, began to blossom naturally. This time, when Gabriel expressed his feelings, Grace saw not a man seeking validation, but a partner who had grown in love and understanding. She accepted him, not because he was a Swaggart or a preacher, but because she could finally see the man he had become, someone who had learned that love is built on more than words and faith alone. Their eventual marriage became a testimony of second chances and spiritual growth. Many in their ministry circle have quietly shared how their relationship today reflects that early struggle, a reminder that sometimes rejection is not the end, but the beginning of something deeper. Grace's decision to wait for understanding didn't just shape their love story, it shaped the way Gabriel now speaks about relationships in his sermons. He often emphasizes communication, patience, and emotional honesty, lessons clearly born from that early chapter in his life. Looking back, The so-called rejection was actually a divine redirection. Grace's strength to say no when things didn't feel right gave Gabriel the space to evolve into the husband and leader he was meant to be. And when they finally came together, it wasn't rushed or uncertain. It was right, grounded, and purposeful. Today, Gabriel and Grace Swaggart are seen as a power couple in Christian ministry, respected, admired, and deeply connected. Their love story reminds us that even strong faith must be matched with emotional understanding. Grace's courage to wait for clarity turned what could have been a failed relationship into one of enduring partnership. In the end, what once seemed like rejection was actually revelation, proof that real love requires more than words, more than shared faith, and more than family name. It requires two people willing to grow, to understand, and to wait for God's perfect timing. And that, perhaps, is the untold truth behind why Grace Brumley once rejected Gabriel Swaggart, and how that very decision became the foundation of the beautiful marriage they now share. After their marriage, many noticed something unique about the way Gabriel and Grace Swaggart carried themselves as a couple. There was no arrogance, no showmanship. Instead, there was peace, unity, and deep respect. Those who had seen Gabriel's earlier personality could tell he had changed for the better. Grace's calm influence and firm understanding of emotional maturity had softened him, making him a more grounded leader and husband. In interviews and public events, Gabriel often praised Grace for her steadiness and wisdom, describing her as the heart of our home. But behind those few words lies a journey filled with lessons, moments of learning, compromise, and forgiveness. For both Gabriel and Grace, marriage was not just a romantic commitment, it was a spiritual partnership built on shared purpose and mutual growth. After the wedding, life wasn't perfect. Ministry work was demanding, and Gabriel carried immense pressure as one of the faces of the Swaggart legacy. Many expected him to preach like his grandfather or lead with the same authority as his father, Donnie Swaggart. That pressure sometimes created tension, especially when Gabriel found it hard to balance ministry obligations with personal time for Grace and their growing family. But Grace's strength once again showed itself in those years. Instead of arguing or retreating, she communicated calmly and clearly, reminding Gabriel of the same principle that had guided her in the beginning, understanding. She didn't demand perfection from him. She encouraged growth. She often reminded him that leadership at home was just as important as leadership in the pulpit. Those quiet conversations shaped Gabriel into the man people see today, one who values humility over pride and empathy over ego. Their marriage slowly became a living message to those in their church and around the world, that ministry begins at home. Gabriel began incorporating those lessons into his sermons, openly speaking about the importance of patience, emotional understanding, and listening to one another. His words carried authenticity because they were born out of experience, not theory. Over time, Grace started to take on more visible roles within the ministry as well. While she was never one to seek the spotlight, her grace, humility, and quiet strength naturally drew people to her. She connected deeply with young women in the congregation who struggled with balancing faith, love, and identity. Grace often shared stories, not in dramatic detail but with honesty, about waiting for God's timing and choosing understanding over impulse. She reminded them that even when something looks right on the surface, it takes prayer and wisdom to truly discern God's plan. Many women later credited Grace's calm mentorship for helping them make better decisions in their own relationships. She became, in many ways, the heart of the ministry, a voice of compassion and discernment that balanced Gabriel's passionate preaching. What makes their story so remarkable is that both of them grew through that initial misunderstanding. Grace's rejection and Gabriel's humility created a foundation of strength that has carried them through every challenge since. Their bond is not built on perfection, but on growth. Two people constantly learning how to love and lead each other better. In private moments, Gabriel has admitted that the time Grace turned him down was one of the most painful experiences of his youth, yet also the most transformative. It taught him not to take people or emotions for granted. It forced him to slow down and learn what true partnership means. Even today, he occasionally mentions how that season of distance gave him the discipline and perspective needed to become not only a better husband, but also a better pastor and father. The couple's journey also speaks volumes about the role of faith in building understanding. For both Gabriel and Grace, prayer was the foundation of every decision, from their early courtship to their parenting and ministry today. They learned that spiritual connection without emotional understanding can feel incomplete. Faith gave them direction, but communication gave them closeness. Their story has inspired many within the Christian community who struggle with waiting for the right person or facing rejection. They often remind others that rejection doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it's God's way of creating the space needed for maturity and preparation. Grace's ability to say no was not about doubt or pride. It was about discernment, and Gabriel's willingness to grow rather than resent that decision turned what could have been heartbreak into healing. Now, as leaders of Crossfire Youth Ministries at Family Worship Center, Gabriel and Grace carry their message to the next generation. Young couples often look to them as role models, not because their love story is perfect, but because it's real. They've lived through misunderstandings, personal struggles, and moments of doubt, yet have remained steadfast through faith and communication. When they speak to youth about relationships, their advice is practical and heartfelt. Take time to understand one another. Don't rush into love just because it feels right. Let God shape both of you before He brings you together. It's a message rooted in their own story, one that began with misunderstanding but matured into mutual respect. As years passed, the same people who once whispered about Grace's rejection now see it as divine wisdom. What looked like hesitation was actually discernment. What felt like delay became preparation. And through it all, their relationship has stood as a living example that God's timing is always better than our own. Today, when Gabriel and Grace stand together on stage, preaching, worshiping, or simply smiling beside one another, there's a visible connection between them that speaks louder than words. It's a connection built on years of patience, forgiveness, and understanding. The early pain of rejection has transformed into a lasting testimony of grace, growth, and unconditional love. In a world where many relationships crumble under misunderstanding, their story stands as proof that faith, patience, and communication can heal almost anything. Grace's decision to wait until she truly felt understood didn't just shape their personal lives, it helped shape a ministry built on truth and compassion. Their journey teaches an unforgettable truth. Love is not found through rushing, forcing, or pretending to understand. It's built through listening, forgiving, and growing. What began as a simple misunderstanding between two young believers became a lifelong lesson in patience and trust. And that's the real untold truth. Not just about why Grace Brumley once rejected Gabriel Swaggart, but how that rejection became the cornerstone of their forever.